what I'm going to talk about, it's not nothing to do with politics. Nothing to do with politics because it's not the question, the whole story of what I call now industry of lies. It's something else. Because each one of us is allowed to have his own views. Fair enough. And you know, I'm coming from Israel. Israel is a democracy. We have many debates about everything. People can be right-wingers. People can be left-wingers. Fair enough. For myself, I'm coming from what you might call the peace camp. And many, many years ago, actually, I went all the way to meet Yasser Arafat before Oslo. I was much younger, as you can see, and I met Yasser Arafat in Tunis. It was an experience. It was interesting. Just to say, it's not that because of my book or because of my writing, I do not meet them anymore. I do. As you see, it's only from some 3 months ago. I met Saeb Arikat, who is the chief negotiator of the Palestinians, to those of you who don't know. Actually, he's a kind of the foreign minister of the Palestinians. I keep on, but I must tell you that as being part of the peace camp in Israel, I was exposed to so many expressions about the conflict that I was amazed. And sometimes you are telling yourself, look, it's because of the so long conflict and because of, you know, hatred, incitement. So it's not a big deal. It's not a big problem. It will pass. It will pass. But the point is that actually it became much worse during the time. In that time, during the 90s, when I had all these meetings with Palestinians, with Arafat, I met him not only in Tunis, I met him again also in, when he came to Gaza and then to Ramallah. I met him several times. I met him, I met others. In that time, I was a lawyer. And then at 2001, I changed my occupation. I went to full-time job in journalism, but then I decided that there is a problem with being a journalist, because journalists are the people who know almost nothing about almost everything. And I did not want to be one of them. That's why I'm in between research and journalism. I also teach in the IDC. IDC is an academic institution in Israel, a private one, a good one, the best one even. I would say, and as a journalist, I decided to go deeper. And what gave me the incentive to begin with this kind of research that I'm doing today in the last 10 years, I read an article. It was one of my first encounters with this kind of what I call today industry of lies. And I read an article of Professor Ilan Pappé. Maybe some of you know the name, maybe not, but he is one of the most popular scholars about the Israeli-Arab conflict. And he published an article saying that the transfer is official moral option recommended by the IDC. IDC is the academic institution that I'm working for. Transfer proposed by senior Labour Party ministers to the government, and so on and so on. I read the article. It was in 2002. And I called him. In that time, he was in Haifa University. I called him and told him, dear Professor Pappé, somebody published an article with your name full of lies. Maybe you should call them and correct them. Then he told me, no. I published it. I said, what? Can you validate one thing that you wrote in this article? And it was quite embarrassing, I must tell you. It was quite an embarrassing conversation, because at the end of the conversation, I told him, tomorrow I'm going to publish an article about your article, following our conversation. And I'm not going to write that you are a liar, because it's not nice. But I'm going to write that you are a mega liar. because that's what he is. It's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable, full of lies. And his book, we will get to it, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, became the Bible about the Israeli-Arab conflict, mainly in 48, but not only in 48, the Nakba. And we will get to the story of Nakba. And by coincidence, in the very same week, I read another article. It was a coincidence of Yitzhak Laor. You don't know him, Israelis know him. He's writing regularly for Haaretz, those of you who read maybe Haaretz. And he's also a scholar. He used to teach in Tel Aviv University. And he wrote an article in a very prestigious magazine claiming that gas chambers are not the only way to destroy a nation. Wow, gas chambers. It's enough to develop high rates of infant mortality, which means that we Israelis are committing a genocide, but in a very tricky way, in a very sophisticated way. But that's what we are, the new Nazis. And I read it and I was surprised. I asked myself, this is a story of what we are doing to the Palestinians? And I checked. In that time, we did not have yet the Google as we have today, because each one of you in a minute will find what is infant mortality among Palestinians in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s. It was not easy, but I found. And what I found was just the opposite, that infant mortality among Palestinians decreased dramatically because of the Israeli health system. Just the opposite. Meaning that actually what he published was a blood libel, a new blood libel, by an Israeli, by a Jew. And then I began to think about the whole, what's going on? What's going on? And now we are speaking about blatant lies, which is quite easy to refute. A publication from 3 years ago, Gaza village flooded as Israel opens dam gates. In many newspapers. There is only one problem. There is not any dam in Israel. I mean, they invented something in order to vilify Israel, to demonize Israel. And it's going on and on. I just gave a year ago a lecture in Columbia University about falsehoods of scholars, of professors. And this is the first example that I presented of somebody from Columbia, you know, Ivy League University. You are expecting that they will know what they are talking about. And he published an article titled Truths, Facts. Wow, here, now we are supposed to read the whole truth about the conflict. And what he published was that Tel Aviv is the only Western city that does not have any Arab or Muslim inhabitants. Wow, I guess all of you. I mean, it's not even funny. It's not in...
Has he been to Tel Aviv to make such an outrageous statement?
They don't, I mean, maybe you don't know, but according to the freedom of speech in the United States, and by the way, also in Israel, they can say whatever they want. Whatever they want. Blatant lies are included in the package deal of the First Amendment in the United States and in Israel. And he kept on, and he wrote about a speech that Netanyahu gave in the UN General Assembly in 2011. And according to him, in that speech, Netanyahu called to expel the Israeli Arabs. I know Netanyahu, and I know that he never said something of that kind, so I went. It's not so complicated to go to the UN archive and to find out what exactly Netanyahu said about the Israeli Arabs, and he said only one sentence: the Jewish state of Israel will always protect the rights of all the more than 1 million Arab citizens of Israel. I mean, yes, it is unbelievable. In the debate that I had in Colombia, I told them that I will never forget them, I will never forgive them for enforcing me to defend Netanyahu. But you have to do it. And here is Juan Col. He is a president. I'm talking only about prominent and influential scholars. I'm not speaking about the others, because otherwise I would not have to write a book, but a whole shelf will not be enough. I'm speaking only about very prominent scholars here in the United States or in Israel or generally. And president of MESA, to those of you who don't know, Middle East Studies Association, here in the United States. He is the head. He is the president. And he wrote an article saying that according to the 9/11 Commission report, this is the official Congress commission, Al-Qaeda conceived the attack, the 9/11 attack, as response to the Israeli attack on Jenin. Now, if you go to the commission report, surprise, surprise, you will not find the name Jenin. You will not find. It was never mentioned. He invented something that, I mean, just like the other one invented something that Netanyahu did not say, he invented something that was never written in the report. And surprise, surprise, there was not any attack in Jenin, but this is another story, because in other publications they describe it as the massacre that Israel carried out in Jenin. Never happened, never happened. The point is, which is even, now you will understand why the Jenin story was not mentioned in the report. The Jenin battle, and there was a battle in Jenin, many Israelis were killed, was 7 months after the 9/11. So maybe they were prophets, I don't know, and they conceived the Jenin. But this is the level of some scholars here in the United States when they speak about the Middle East conflict. And it's going on. Sarah Roy, sometimes it's not a blatant lie, it's a manipulation. Sarah Roy, she's Jewish. She even defines herself as the daughter of Holocaust survivors. You know, it gives a special status if you are a survivor. And she wrote an article about Gaza, and she is an expert here in the United States about Gaza. She is the #1 expert. She's teaching in Harvard. And according to her, they are suffering. Yes, they are suffering. There is not any lie. But I read the article, thousands of words. I was asked to respond. So that's why, I received the article. And surprise, surprise, she's talking about, she's blaming Israel again and again, of course. But the word Hamas and who is ruling the Gaza Strip was not mentioned even one time. Can you talk about North Korea without mentioning the regime? Not a word, not one time. Thousands of words blaming Israel again and again. Not one word. And it's going on and on and on. Not everything is a blatant lie. Now we are going to the lies that are much more complicated. Now we are going to manipulations. And first, and above everything else, is the story of the Nakba, which is described by so many scholars as a cleansing, an ethnic cleansing. And let me tell you something. It happened. People were forced out during the war. To deny it will be stupid, because it happened. Now, how many of them, how many of the 700,000, how many escaped, how many were forced out? There is a debate among scholars. It's about 20-30% that were forced out during the war. Yes, it happened. So many academics say again and again that the Nakba is one of the great crimes of modern history. Here the manipulation begins. Why the manipulation begins here? Because in order to understand what happened, we have now, yes, it happened, we have to zoom out and to understand the context. Without understanding the context, we will never understand what happened in the Nakba. And what is a context? The context is that we are talking about time when empires collapsed. When empires collapsed, it was because the creation of nation state, because of self-determination, because Woodrow Wilson, for example, declared his 14 points at the end of the First World War. The main one was self-determination. Now, empires, by their nature, were multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and so on. When nation states were created all over Europe, a lot of minorities were forced out in order to enable the nation state, the self-determination. And the huge process began, actually, of forcing people out of their homelands. Turkey and Greece, about 2 million people were forced out from side to side. In the Balkans in general, including in the 90s, when Yugoslavia collapsed, we are speaking about 7 million people. Ethnic Germans, between 12 and 16 million people who were forced out from all the surrounding countries. And Poland, Ukraine, and the same India, Pakistan. It went on. Cyprus and Armenia, Azerbaijan, even in the 80s. It went on. The point is that what we have to understand, as I mentioned, for example, Woodrow Wilson, who declared the 14 points, this person, to understand, and now I want you just to understand the norms of that time, the context. This person, Fridtjof Nansen, he received the Nobel Prize for Peace because he initiated and conducted the population exchange between Turkey and Greece. The highest international court of that time, Permanent Court of International Justice, declared that population exchange is the best way to achieve peace between nations. A lot of Arab leaders from Palestine, I call them Arab leaders because they were not Palestinians. People don't understand it many times. People don't understand that my parents who grew up in Palestine, they were Palestinians. Every Jewish institution was a Palestine Post, which is now the Jerusalem Post, and so on and so on. Palestine Bank, which is now Bank Leumi, the National Bank of Israel. I mean, there was not one Arab institution that was called Palestine something. Only the Jews, because once Golda said, there is not any Palestinian people because we are Palestinians. People did not understand what she's talking about. But Palestinians were only the Jews under the British mandate. People don't understand it. Anyway, the Arabs of Palestine, the leaders like Musa Alami, understood and even recommended population exchange between Jews and Arabs. It was declared by the Peel Commission, the first commission of Britain that recommended how to solve the problem between Jews and Arabs. It was recommended by other Arab leaders, like Nouri Said, who was one of the leading Arab leaders. He was the prime minister of Iraq. And a lot of other leaders from that time. And it's going on and on and on. We will not go to all of them. Winston Churchill, the leader of the free world in that time, the leader, at the end of the Second World War, he declared, expulsion is the method which will be the most satisfactory and lasting. There will be no mixture of population to cause endless trouble. This is the atmosphere of the 40s and the years before. And it's going on to understand the context. This person, the Mufti, Haj Amin al-Husseini, who collaborated during the whole Second World War with the Nazis, he wrote in his memoirs that he is collaborating with the Nazis in order to receive free hand to eradicate every last Jew from Palestine and the Arab world. Not Europe. Now we are talking about the Arab world and Palestine. And it's going on and on and on, like the Secretary General of the Arab League, who declared in that time, before the war began, this will be a war of extermination, to understand the atmosphere of the time. Now, we have to make clear, I'm talking about the norms of that time. Today, Winston Churchill and others would be sent to the ICC, which is the International Criminal Court. But the norms of that time were that population exchange are acceptable. This is a way to solve problems. It's very interesting because if you can read it in my book, because actually the Zionist movement, when the Labour Party in Britain recommended population exchange, the Zionists sent a delegation to London in order to tell them, no, this is not our solution to the problem. Even when the international community recommended it, the Jews were reluctant about it. Some of them supported it, some of them did not support it, but it was not the official policy of the Zionist movement. And it went on and on and on when the Arab League, for example, they have a draft bill that actually turned all the Jews from Arab countries to a kind of hostages. And actually, they carried out a lot of massacres against Jews in Arab countries, country by country. Not all the Jews from Arab countries were forced out, but many of them were forced out. The atmosphere was that they cannot stay. And the outcome eventually was that, yes, I'm taking the UN number, even if the number of the refugees from Palestine is under debate, 711,000 of Arabs, not Palestinians. They became Palestinians much later, only after the Six-Day War. But in that time, they were Arabs. They became refugees, but a bigger number of Jews became refugees. Jews from Arab countries. I'm not speaking now about Jews from Europe. My in-laws from Europe, they became refugees in Europe like many other Jews. My family, my grandmother, by the way, she escaped to Israel when she was young, 100 years ago. 100 years ago. Why? Because Jews were persecuted in Yemen. She had no idea what is to be a refugee or not. I mean, she never defined herself as a refugee. But she had to escape because Jews were persecuted. She was a refugee. So it's not only the Jews who came in 48, 49, and after. Not only them. Many Jews were forced, actually, to escape in the years before. Like Jews from Yemen, Jews from Iraq, Jews from other places. And when they came to Israel, they lived in Ma'abarot, which is transit camp, which is actually refugee camps. During the 50s, they were refugees, just like anybody else. Altogether, we are speaking about between 52 to 60 million people who became refugees only because of population exchange. There were many other reasons. There are new waves of refugees. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking only about refugees because of population exchange, because it was the norm. Out of them, nobody is a refugee today. It's over. Ethnic Germans who were forced out, who were pushed to Germany, they are not refugees. Poland, Ukraine, they are not refugees. Nobody is a refugee. Turkey, Greece, they are not refugees. Except one community that emerged from 700,000 to more than 5 million. Only one community. Many times you can hear people are saying, well, Israel should obey the international laws, the international community standards. Fair enough. I'm always saying, yes, fair enough. It should be for both sides. You cannot single out the Palestinians. You cannot single them out. And the singling out, just before we will talk about singling out, I mentioned already John Mearsheimer. Some of you know the name because he the co-author of the book Against AIPAC. He wrote in the 90s, during the Yugoslavia war, ethnically homogeneous states must be created. It would require transferring populations. Very interesting. I mean, how comes that the same person, when he's talking about the Israeli-Arab conflict, he's saying the Nakba is one of the great crimes? I asked him, by the way, I mean, can you explain the contradiction between the two views that you expressed? He did not answer me. Even if we speak about severity, when you check what happened in other events of population exchange, you find out that the worst was, of course, Armenia, that became a genocide, actually. When they were a minority, unwanted minority, they were forced out, but the outcome was a genocide. And you go on, and you find out that among the Arabs who were forced out of Israel, 13,000 were killed. The number is much smaller, but I'm saying 13,000 because I'm taking the number of Arif al-Arif, a Palestinian historian, because I don't want anybody to tell me that even if I take the highest number, I rest my case. Why? Because even according to him, it's less than 2%, much less than any other population exchange. Much less. So how come that Professor Mearsheimer, and he is not the only one, all of them, how come that they claim again and again that this is one of the worst cases? I mean, how come? I mean, how dare you? Don't you know the facts? They do, but they ignore in order to vilify Israel. Now, when we ask ourselves why the Palestinian problem was perpetuated, we have to bear in mind that the UN established two agencies. One is the UNHCR, which is dealing with all the refugees in the world. And one is UNRWA, which is specified only for the Palestinians. Now, it is very interesting because it was founded, this one was founded exactly 5 days after the commission. Exactly 5 days. Why? Because the Arabs did not want to be included in the commission. They wanted a special treatment. They wanted actually not to solve the problem, but to leave it as an open wound. That's what they wanted. And it's a huge success. It's a huge success because we still have UNRWA. So many years. But there was, by the way, very interesting, most scholars even don't know it, there was also UNRWA. What is UNRWA? UNRWA is the same like UNRWA, but only for the refugees of Korea. Very interesting, they worked during the 50s, and it's finished. In something like 6-7 years, it's finished. Not the Palestinians. They never wanted to solve the problem, not the Arab world. The definition of a refugee is not the same definition. We will not go to all the details. The goals are not the same goals. Everything is not the same. Everything is not the same. The new chapter, I mean, after we finished with the Nakba and creating the refugees problem, is the 67 war. And you hear again and again so many scholars claiming that actually it's because of the expansion aspirations of the Zionist movement, which is an imperialist movement, and so you hear it again and again by so many scholars. I mean, it's tiring, but they say it again and again. What is the reality when we check? What really is the story of the 67? Why Israel occupied the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, call it as you want. Because every name that you will give it will be political. Because right-wingers don't like that it will be called West Bank, and I guess you know the problem. in order to understand what happened, we have to look at what the Arab world declared again and again in the years there was not any occupation. Clear enough? Yes. Now, very interesting, before we get to what they declared, I mean, how comes that between 49 and 67, they did not establish a Palestinian state? It was not under any Israeli rule. There was not any occupation. Why they did not? They did not. Because they never wanted a Palestinian state, but this is another story. Anyway, the Arab League declared in 1964, that they are coming to exterminate Israel. Every Arab leader in the years before the war declared the same. We are coming to exterminate you. Gamal Abdel Nasser, we are coming for the destruction of Israel. And again, everyone to wipe Israel off the map. The leader of the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, he was before Yasser Arafat. He declared 3 days before the war began, 3 days before, whoever survives after the wars will stay in Palestine, the Jews. Nice of him that we will survive, huh? That's nice. But he continued, but in my opinion, no one will remain alive. Which means that the plan was to commit a genocide. They said it before. He said it 3 days before the war. So we have to apologize. We have to apologize, according to so many scholars, that we were not defeated and all massacred. We really have to apologize. And then we are coming to, yes, now we live under Israeli rule of the Judea and Samaria, and what people say about the occupation. What is happening in Palestine is a crime as what happened at Auschwitz. That's what we are doing. And this idea is repeating itself again and again. What you do to the Palestinians is just like what the Nazis did to you. And I took many humanitarian parameters in order to understand what happened to the Palestinians from 67 up to now. And if you take, we spoke already about infant mortality, but in a global comparison, you find out that the Palestinians are doing much better than the global average, much better, even much better than Turkey. Why do I mention Turkey? I will tell you in a minute. And the same about the same life expectancy. Life expectancy of the Palestinians is quite higher than the global average. It's the best way to show that actually they are not the miserable people that they are described again and again. They are doing better than some European countries. People don't understand it. They are doing better than Turkey. And why I'm saying Turkey? Because when the flotilla, Mavi Marmara came, I published an article that it should be the other way around, from the Palestinians to Turkey, because Palestinians are doing better than the Turks. And when the BDS motions are presented in so many universities and academic institutions and associations, because we are speaking about universities, they are saying, well, Israel destroyed the Palestinian education, so we have to support them because what Israel did. And what is the reality? The reality is that according to them, I'm taking only Palestinian sources in order to validate what I'm saying. The president of Birzeit admitted, in 67, we did not have one higher education institution in the West Bank or Gaza, not even one. Now, again, according to their official publications, they have more than 40 academic institutions in the West Bank and Gaza, more than 40. And the result is that right now, Palestinians have the highest per capita rate of university graduates in the Arab world. This is not the destruction of the Palestinian. Under the Israeli rule, they flourished, they prospered. Of course, speaking about health, of course, speaking about education. Let me make something clear, because this is a claim that I hear from time to time. Well, you know, what you are saying does not refute that there is a problem, because even the blacks under the apartheid did much better than all the surrounding the blacks in the surrounding countries, which is true, by the way. Blacks in South Africa, to be a black under the apartheid regime was much better than to be a black under any other regime around. And my answer is very simple. I'm not saying that occupation is good or not good. It's not the story. My story is to refute what you are saying about the occupation when you claim that this is a kind of a Nazi regime against them. So, by the way, not like in South Africa, if they want peace, and we will get to it, they could get it again and again and again. They always refused. So to compare between the two systems is quite a manipulation or whatever. And then come the lie of genocide. And why did I write about genocide? Because I gave a lecture in Boston, and there was a small demonstration downstairs of the student of JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace. You heard about them. And I came, and I saw them, and I began to speak with two students, two nice Jewish students. And I told them genocide. I asked them, how many Palestinians were killed? And they looked one at the other. One said 600,000, and the other one said 6 million.
What?
And it's the JVP. JVP is not something which is normal. I mean, so you cannot expect to a normal response. So we spoke. They did not know who I am. And then I told them, after something like 4 or 5 minutes of asking them questions about, they thought because of my colors that I came to be one of them to demonstrate with them. And, you know, colored here in the United States, it's good sometimes to be colored. You're not the white privilege and so on and so on. This in intersectionality. And then I told them, I have something to tell you. I'm the speaker. Will you please come up and listen? Just listen. And then let's talk after. Surprise, surprise, they looked at each other and they said, okay, we are coming. And they did. And the end of the story after what I'm going to show you, because that's what they also saw. You know, during the 30s, the big lie, as it's called by Professor Jeff Herf, who is one of the most important scholars about Europe and the Nazi propaganda, the Jew is the great danger to humanity. They said it again and again. It was a kind of brainwashing machine. This is a big lie. This is a big lie. It's called the big lie. When you come to nowadays, you find that Arun Gandhi, the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, now he is already American, and he is the head of an academic institution in Rochester University, and he published an article saying, you have to read it carefully. We have created a culture of violence. Who is we? I don't know. Israel and the Jews are the biggest players. And that culture of violence is eventually going to destroy humanity. Now, in that time, it was said the same by Nazis. Now, the most enlightened people are repeating the same idea. He did not even distinguish between Jews and Israel, because many times you can hear people saying, no, we are only against Israel, we have nothing against Jews. Okay, some of them mean it, but many do not really mean it. But here is Jews and Israel. We are all in the same boat. And this is the most enlightened people around here. And the image of, again, Israel and Nazis, you can see it in so many cartoons, demonstrations, I mean, how they depict Israel again and again and again and again and again. And here you see Claire Short. She was a minister in the British government. And she said the oppression of the Palestinian people is the major cause of violence in the world. Same idea, again. You see, the Jewish state is the problem. She even blamed Israel in the global warming. I mean, I have no idea what is the connection between Israel. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. I know, I know, it is crazy. And here in the United States, just from 3 months ago, here, a professor told their students that this is from his presentation. I found his presentation. It's taken as is from his presentation. This is not, this is mine. This is all from a slide from his presentation. They are guilty of genocide, the two of them. They are the same. And then he's telling his students, in order to be political, that's why he's supporting the BDS. It's also from his presentation. It's not mine. This is what the students here are exposed to, this kind of propaganda by professors. It's not limited only to some professors, scholars, activists. When you go to the BBC global poll, you find out that Israel has the most negative influence in the world. People believe it. Lies prevail. You know, many times, I was also a lawyer, I know something about the American law. One of the excuses for the First Amendment, for freedom of speech, is that in the marketplace of ideas, truth will prevail. Sorry, it's a lie. Truth does not prevail. Truth does not prevail. Lies prevail. Now, what is the reality? And that's what I showed to the two students of the JVPs that I spoke with you about. What is the reality? That between 86, it depends on the source. There are many sources. How many people were killed globally since the foundation of Israel up to now? It's somewhere between 86 to 190. 12 million people were killed in the Muslim and Arab world since the foundation of Israel. Most of them, needless to say, by Muslims and Arabs. In the Israeli-Arab conflict, it's between 80 to 120,000, which I'm not altogether speaking about the Independence War, Yom Kippur War, and so on, 6 Days War. In the territories, West Bank and Gaza, we are speaking about between 11 and 12,000, which I'm not proud about. I'm just giving you in order to understand the proportions. By the way, it's less than people who were killed by car accidents. Most of them are combatants, terrorists. When you check what is the contribution of Israel to the global violence, you find out that it's 0.0006 something, which statistically 0. But yet, people blame Israel in the violence in the world. What is the connection between what's happening in Nigeria, in Congo, in Libya, in Yemen, to Israel? 0, no connection at all. People kill each other because of reasons that we cannot even understand. We cannot even understand. And the main source to violence in the last 10 years is the global jihad. Now, people think that the global jihad is against Israelis, Americans, Europeans. Not at all. Not at all. 99% of the victims of the global jihad are Muslims. Once in 2-3 months, they are succeeding to kill 2 or 3 or more people in Europe or in Israel or in the United States. But most times we are not speaking about, most times, 99% the victims are Muslims. They kill themselves. The global jihad is a problem of the Muslims, not of the West. Yes, the West needs security measures in order to stop them. But generally speaking, we are speaking about the global jihad that is killing Muslims. When you go to people like Jimmy Carter or the foreign minister of Sweden, they are, whatever is happening, whenever there is a terror attack in Europe, they are blaming who? Oh, Israel is oppressing the Palestinians, and that's why it happens. Like the people who are the perpetrators don't even know where is Israel on the map. They have no idea. But yet they blame Israel because this is what the enlightened people, unfortunately, are doing again and again. Just something which is very interesting. I gave a lecture in the Cadets Academy in Rome of the Foreign Ministry. They have a special institution. And it was immediately after Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi declared that he is coming to conquer Rome. Maybe you remember it, some years ago. And then they were kind of laughing in the panel. You see, I mean, this is the difference between the global jihad and the Hamas. Global jihad is talking about building a new caliphate, you know, the Islamic empire. And Hamas is just a kind of resistance against the Israeli occupation. There is not any occupation in Gaza, but... And then I told them, you're totally wrong. Because I had this kind of 2 videotapes, which I'm not going to show you now because we don't have time, but 2 leaders of the Hamas saying again and again, we are coming to conquer Rome before Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And why they are saying it? Because Rome is the symbol of Christianity. And all the global jihad movements want to conquer Rome. They did not, I mean, they were kind of surprised. What? Hamas is talking about us? Said, yeah, you just ignore it. Just like you ignore so many other kind of information about what is the nature of the global jihad. What is the real, who is talking about genocide? Not Israel. It's the Hamas Charter, I guess you know it. It's the Hamas in their own channel. This is what they broadcast.
اللهم يا ربنا ويا مولانا ويا سيدنا اهزم أعداءك وأعداء الدين في كل مكان. اللهم عليك باليهود ومن هاودهم والنصارى ومن ناصرهم والشيوعيين ومن شايعهم. اللهم أحصهم عددا واقتلهم بددا ولا تغادر منهم أحدا.
اسمع يا صديقي، في عندكم يهود؟ صديقي يا قيس.
هسه لا.
طيب انا سمعت هم بيجوا عليكم كل يوم.
بس هسه لا.
طيب اسمع يا صديقي، اعمل ايدك هيك.
مخيط.
لما يجوا عندكم اضربهم بوكس. خلي وجهه بنداره.
ان شاء الله عشان نحرر فلسطين.
ان شاء الله. صديقي. طيب على العموم يا روان، أنا بقول له يمسك حجر ولما يجي اليهود عنده يمسكوه وبوه.
طبعا الجيران اليهوديين عادي
يطبش عليهم
لو كانوا يهود يعني جيرانه أو صهاينة عادي. طيب ليش حابة تصيري شرطية؟ ليش؟ زي مين؟
زي
عمه. مين عمه؟ أحمد. هو شرطي؟ شو بيسوي طب الشرطي؟
بحبس الحرامي واللي بيعمل مشاكل
وبطخي اليهود، صح؟ انت بدك تصيري زيه؟ ان شاء الله لما تكبري.
لما طخ اليهود
كلهم؟ كلهم؟ طيب.
That's what they broadcast to their children. Again and again, we have to kill all the Jews. All the Jews, not Israelis, not Zionists, all the Jews. That's this is the way that they brainwash the new generation. And the same is going on in many Western countries. I mean, in Germany, for example, you know that the slogan of the Der Stürmer, I guess you all know what is the Der Stürmer, was the Jews are our misfortune, and they published it in every issue of the anti-Semitic newspaper. That's what they Every day it was a kind of, that's what people were exposed to. And when you go to a demonstration today, nowadays, when they demonstrate against Israel, you see a combination of extreme right-wingers, extreme left-wingers, and jihadists. And what they are saying, they are repeating the same kind of slogan. Now it's Israel, our biggest misfortune. So when people don't understand anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, we have to understand that we are speaking about the same patterns, the same kind of demonization. In that time, it was clear that it is by the most terrible people. Nowadays, many times, it's coming, the same ideas coming from the people who are supposed to be progressives, most enlightened. But the same kind of propaganda many times. Not everyone, let's not include everyone who is progressive in that, but too many. And it's going on and on and on. A parliament member in Holland, for example, marching in a demonstration when behind him people are shouting, Hamas, Hamas, Jews to the Gaza. And this is a kind of coalition of jihadists and left-wingers, extreme left-wingers, which exist in so many places. In the intersectionality which is taking place right here in the universities. I mean, I see it again and again, which is quite sad. And demonstrations that are taking place in the last half year in Gaza, in the Gaza border, what they don't show you is that here are the demonstrators. Here they are. I just had a debate with the guy from the New York Times. He's a kind of, I mean, we speak a lot, and he's quoting me from time to time, which is nice of him. But we have debates, and I asked him, David, when did you show the pictures of what they are really doing? When did you mention? Why don't you mention? Why don't you show your readership reality? I mean, facts. I'm not talking. Then he found something that once in one of the articles, it was not exactly mentioned, but he had the kind of excuse. But this is the nature of the demonstrators. They are not peaceful demonstrators. Why don't you mention it? Why doesn't he mention it? And he's not anti-Israeli, don't misunderstand me. If he is a friend of mine, he's not one of them. But yet, he's from the New York Times, and we know exactly what the New York Times want. Today, by the way, he interviewed me for a long time about the BDS, so it will appear in one of the next days. I hope he will quote me rightly. This is something that they will never publish. Out of the 187 people who were killed since the beginning in April of the demonstrations, out of them 150 are totally affiliated with the Hamas and the Fatah. Totally. Why don't you mention it? Why don't you mention it? Why don't you say it? We don't know that the other 37 are not. But we know for sure that most of them belong to the terror organizations. And there is something very interesting because not everybody out there is lunatic and against Israel. This guy from Britain is not Jewish. And he wrote, forming your opinion on the Israeli, he spoke about Hezbollah, but war on the basis of Western media reports is a bit like deciding what you think of the Second World War based on reports on the firebombing in Germany. I'll tell you a secret. I wrote it before him, but it's much better to quote him than to quote myself. But not every, I mean, he was the editor of Spectator, and you see, not everyone is, I mean, some people are decent enough. Even in the New York Times, you can find decent articles from time to time. Yeah. And it's going on and on and on. Peace process. You know, there is a blame game. Why did it fail? Why did it fail again and again? I'll tell you a short story only. I mean, I can tell you that from 1937, the Peel Commission, they rejected. The partition resolution in 47, they rejected. 67, the 3 no's of the Khartoum summit. 2000, we will get to it, they said no to the Clinton peace plan. 2008, they said no to the Walmart proposal. 2014, they said no to John Kerry and Obama. But a very symbolic story about what happened. At the end of 2000, after the Camp David summit failed, Yasser Arafat and Ehud Barak, it failed. The two sides asked Bill Clinton to put on the table his own plan, which he did in December 2000. 2 states for 2 peoples, evacuating something like 95% of the territories, partition of Jerusalem. Not easy, not for Israel. And the Israeli government convened and decided upon to accept the Clinton plan. Everyone was waiting for the Palestinian response. Arafat came to Washington. And in Rich Hotel, he met this guy. This guy is Ben-Dror Ben Sultan. Ben-Dror Ben Sultan was the Saudi Arabia ambassador to the United States and a very close friend of Clinton. A very close friend. They went out for vacation and so on. Very close friend. And this guy had a historical role. Why I'm saying it? I'm saying it because in the very few days between from the days that Bill Clinton published his plan and the days that Yasser Arafat came to Washington, he convinced his king and he convinced some Arab leaders to accept the plan. And why I'm saying that it was historical because for the first time, they accepted a plan that included the definition of Israel as the homeland of the Jewish people. They always refused, so it was a kind of a turning point. Now everyone was waiting for Yasser Arafat. And they met in Rich Hotel in Washington just before Arafat went to deliver his response to the plan. And he told him one sentence before he left the room. If we lose this opportunity, it is not going to be a tragedy. This is going to be a crime. How do I know what have been said behind closed doors? How do I know? I know because he published it himself. Ben-Dror Ben Sultan. Arafat went to the White House and committed both a crime and a tragedy, and we know the Second Intifada, thousands were killed, Israelis, Palestinians. But when you look to the scholars who write about what happened with the Clinton plan, they ignore Ben-Dror Ben Sultan. Somehow, it doesn't fit their school of thought, which is blaming Israel in the failure of the peace process. So they just ignore it. I was looking again and again in so many articles dealing with what happened at the end of 2000 and the beginning of 2001. They just ignore it. I mean, this is the best document that we have, actually. I mean, a testimony of a leader from the Arab world saying, we accepted it, Arafat rejected it. But it is totally ignored. The 2 leaders of the BDS, Omar Barghouti and Ali Abu Nama, they say again and again, we are against 2-state solution. We are against any kind of peace. We are against any kind of reconciliation. We are against the very existence of the Jewish state. And many times, even people who support the BDS, it's not black and white. Many of them think that this is a kind of a non-violent movement against the occupation. That's what they think. They are manipulated. But actually, the main goal of the BDS, they openly declared nobody is trying to hide it, is the destruction of Israel. Just for them, I don't have to convince you that Israel is not an apartheid state. I'm showing them just one example of what is the nature of Israel. You all know that, this man was sent to 7 years in jail. He was the president of Israel. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm not proud of what he did, but he had 3 judges. The presiding judge was George Kara, an Israeli Arab. I mean, you can say a lot of things about Israel. This is not an apartheid state, because you could never conceive that a black judge during the apartheid will send the president of South Africa to 7 years in jail. I mean, so it's so ridiculous to define Israel as an apartheid state. They don't understand the realities. And sometimes you have to. By the way, in Israel it was a non-issue. Even many Israelis did, I mean, even if they knew that it was George Kara, an Arab, nobody cares about. Nobody mentioned it. So what? Just yesterday, the guy who was elected to the first place in the Labour Party, Itzik Shmuli, who is a good friend of mine, by the way, and he's the most popular in the Labour. He is gay. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody mentioned it because in Israel people don't understand. Here people don't understand it. It's a non-issue. So what? He is a good Knesset member, and maybe he is going to be the next leader of the Labour Party. But nobody cares about it. Nobody cares. Just the way that nobody cared about the fact that the presiding judge in the case of the president of the Jewish state is an Arab. Nobody cared about it. But they don't understand it. And they keep on blaming Israel. And then you can read articles in the New York Times, oh, it's a pinkwashing. Like Israel is, we are so good, everything good that Israel is doing is a kind of pinkwashing. Israel is the first one in international aid to many disasters that are happening in the world. It's a kind of pinkwashing. Everything, so we are so great. Everything that we are doing is a kind of a pinkwashing. By the way, what young students do not understand, many times I give lectures only about tikkun olam. You know what's tikkun olam, I guess, because sometimes I'm asked, how do you say it in Hebrew? Tikkun olam. And I conducted the research under the title of contribution to humanity per capita. There is not any. I mean, if you will go now to Google, you will find my article about it. And I just try to check, I mean, who is helping the most? Mainly the third world, Africa and Asia. Agriculture, water desalination, watering systems, health, and so on. Agriculture, of course. And you will find out immediately that Israel, not only per capita in some fields, but let's say only per capita, comparing to the size of Israel, Israel is leading in contribution to humanity. They don't know it, so I'm telling them, if you're looking for tikkun olam, you have to make aliyah to Israel. Because this is, I mean, there is not one state in the world that is contributing so much to the world. A year ago, I went to listen to a lecture in Columbia University, and there were 4 students. It was very interesting. I'll tell you, one student was from Zambia, student in Columbia. And he told, I came here, he told, each one of them told his story. I will just say his short story. They said, I came here and I was exposed to the fact that Israel is a monster. I didn't know that Israel is a monster because for me, as somebody who is coming from Zambia, the Israelis are angels. They did so much for us in health, in agriculture, that for me, we, at our home, we have the picture of Golda Meir in our house. And you are telling me that Israel is a monster? Are you crazy? Are you crazy? Do you have any idea what is Israel for us Africans? But we don't have too many people like him, unfortunately. They are coming here, they are brainwashed, they have no idea what they are talking about, and they are depicting Israel as the monster amongst nations. And it's going on and on and on. We are getting to the last chapter. You know, many people who are not enemies of Israel, not anti-Israelis, many times they say, well, you, Israel, you have the right to defend yourself. It's fair enough against Hamas, but you kill them in a very disproportional way. The retaliation is not balanced. That's one of the claims of people who do not hate Israel. Who do not hate. And they say it again and again. We will not go, even Bernie Sanders and others. I mean, it's okay to defend yourself, but you kill too many people. And the most terrible report was conducted by Richard Goldstein. Maybe you heard about him. After the Cast-Lead operation. 600 pages that you did not read, but I did. I had to in my research. And his main claim, if we summarize the 600 pages, is that Israel intentionally killed innocent civilians. Now, we corresponded in that time, before he published his report. And of course, I was quite disappointed. He was interviewed again and again. Immediately after he published the report, he was interviewed in Israel, he was interviewed here, he was interviewed in Europe. And I listened to his interviews in order to understand what he's talking about, this man. Because by the way, I even sent him some information, which he totally, of course, ignored. He was nice, he always answered, but he was interviewed. And he was asked the same question again and again. Why do you blame Israel? Because innocent civilians are killed in every battlefield. Why do you single out Israel? And let's listen to what he said.
You know, the U.S. in its war on terror carpet bombs Afghanistan and Iraq and hurts innocent civilians. Is the U.S. then guilty of war crimes?
Well, certainly if war crimes were committed, of course they should be investigated. Any war crime should be investigated. And, you know, I don't with respect accept your description of what they did. It's something obviously I haven't investigated.
Fair enough, he did not investigate the US Army. Fair enough. But then he was asked the same question by Bill Moyers, maybe you know him from the PBS. But Bill Moyers was fair enough to ask the same question. And listen to the new answer of Goldstone.
Israelis claim that if you hold them to this standard that you've just described, that law prescribes for conflict, any democracy that's fighting terrorism is likely to find itself dragged into an international court of justice. I mean, do you consider that a valid concern?
No, absolutely not. Take the United States fighting wars in Kosovo, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. They have certainly at a high level gone to extremes to protect innocent civilians.
You could see the difference. I mean, 3 days before, he had no idea about the American army. 3 days after, when he was interviewed to the American audience, oh, you went to extremes in order to protect innocent civilians. He wanted to flatter, but he's an hypocrite, and he has no idea what he's talking about. Anyway, he challenged me. Before I'll show you what I did, just an example of Martin Dempsey, who was the chief of staff here in the United States, what he is saying.
I actually do think that Israel went to extraordinary lengths to limit collateral damage and civilian casualties. In fact, about 3 months ago, we asked Benny if we could send a lessons learned team. One of the things we do better than anybody, I think, is learn. And we sent a team of senior officers and non-commissioned officers over to work with the IDF to get the lessons from that particular operation in Gaza, to include the measures they took to prevent civilian casualties.
Here is Dempsey saying, when I want to know how to protect innocent civilians, I send my officers to Israel because Israel is doing, who knows better, Goldstone or Dempsey? But this is not my point. I mean, this is nice to show it, but this is not the point. The point is that I conducted my own research. What I did, what he said, that Israel actually fired indiscriminately. Indiscriminate fire. Now, indiscriminate fire, this is the age distribution among Palestinians in Gaza, okay? Now, if Israel did what Goldstone said, the graph of fatalities should be almost the same graph because it was indiscriminate, just to shoot them and not to separate between the civil population, between civilians and combatants. I checked not according to what the Israeli army published. I checked according to what Hamas published every day, age, place, and gender. Every day. So I took what the Hamas published and I created this graph. Age distribution of the fatalities. What you can see in first sight is that the biggest block is of men, not women, in the fighting age. It's totally contradicting what Goldstone said. Now, I did something more. I took all the battlefields that he mentioned in many interviews. I took all the battlefields and I checked one by one how many combatants and how many non-combatants were killed in every battlefield. And you find out that not only absolutely, which is clear, Israel killed much less than other battlefields, but even proportionally, Israel killed much less. Much less. So I sent one more email to Goldstone. And I told him, dear Mr. Goldstone, you were completely right when you claimed that the American army went to extremes in order to protect innocent civilians. Yes, you were. But let's keep on. Here are the numbers. The meaning is that Israel went to the extremes of the extremes of the extremes of the extremes in order to protect innocent civilians. Here are the numbers. Here is the graph. Maybe you were wrong? It was the first time that he did not answer me. He did not. But he published, not because of me, but because of many other reasons, he published an article of retraction, actually. He sent it to the New York Times, who refused to publish it. Why? To confuse the readership. It was published in the Washington Post eventually. If I had known now, if I had known then what I know now, the Goldstone report would have been a different report. He retracted. Actually, in a way, he is summarizing all what I wanted to say. It has nothing to do with your political views. It has to do with basic facts. First, you have to know. Then you can have any opinion that you want, but based on facts. I know that facts are not popular. We are in the age of fake news. I belong maybe to the old generation who, first of all, I want the facts. Then, let's continue. So we live in a very problematic age. You know, years before it was Francis Bacon who said that knowledge is power. The whole anti-Israeli campaign, the demonization campaign, is based on one thing: ignorance is power. In order to end my lecture, I will tell you what happened with the two students. Oh, yes. Okay. The two students approached me, of course, immediately after the lecture and told me we are totally confused. What we saw, numbers, graphs, quotes, and so on, we have no idea. Maybe you are manipulating us. We do not have the knowledge in order to challenge you. We just don't have. What we want you to do is to come and to give a lecture to the JVP chapter, because there are people there who know the information much better than us. And they will be able to challenge you, to refute what you are saying. I said, fair enough. It was in the year, by the way, that I wrote the book, and I was in Boston. My wife had a sabbatical year in Harvard, not me. But we lived in Brookline, Harvard in that time. And I thought, OK, I'm willing to come. And then 10 days after, they called me and said, we are very, very sorry, but the JVP chapter is not willing to accept you to give a lecture, which I knew that it will be the outcome. the two of them, after the answer of the JVP chapter, left the JVP. At least 2 students I saved. Thank you so much for listening. So if anybody has any question, the question is if by saying the truth you can fight this kind of demonization. I'll tell you, it's very interesting, but the most important audience to this kind of information, to my lectures, is the pro-Israeli students or the pro-Israeli camp. Why? Because even if they are pro-Israelis, and I gave a lot of lectures to this kind of Hillel chapters and pro-Israelis audiences, they don't know. And when they don't know, they are easily attracted to this kind of dialogue with the JVP and SJP, or this anti-Israeli organization, and they are coming very confident, and they are speaking about justice, and all we want is just justice to go back to our land, to our homeland. And we were forced out, so what the Palestinians want, they have the right, international kind of justice, and that's all we want. And they don't know what to answer. They don't know, most of them, most of the pro-Israelis. And in many cases, in many universities, what happened is that students from Hillel, after they began the dialogue with the JVP and the SJP, they became part of them because they did not know what to answer. The 2 students who represented the BDS in the, I don't know how it's called, the Students' Council, were 2 ex-Israelis. No, their parents were Israelis, but they were in Hillel, and they were in a kind of dialogue, and they were totally convinced that Israel is the monster among nations. And yes, Palestinians have the right of return, which does not exist, by the way, in the international law, but they did not know. And they moved. And they representing the BDS. Here are 2 ex-Israelis, Jews, representing the BDS in the student council. They don't know. So this is the target audience for me, for my book, for my publications. Because I cannot convince people who are totally against Israel. They are totally biased. They don't want to hear. They don't care about facts. But some people do. Let's talk to them. The question is, how can you compare between the Palestinian Nakba and other events of population exchange? Sure, well, I can tell you that actually when we compare, the Nakba is the most, how to say it, the soft case. And why? First of all, because much less people were killed in the process. Second, it was them, Arabs, who declared we are coming to commit a genocide against Israel, the just not even born entity. And what they did to the Jews from Arab countries, it was much terrible because Jews from Arab countries did not declare any war, did not do anything against the Arab regimes. So if you compare, it is much worse in the other cases than in the Israeli-Arab case. Because, yes, there was an agreement. They rejected it, the partition resolution. They declared war. In a war, people escape and people were forced out. It happened in every other conflict. It happened also now. When you say that in other cases it was agreed upon, yes and no. Yes and no, because in all the other cases, nobody wanted to leave his homeland. There was not any agreement between India and Pakistan, for example.
There was an agreement
Now about the ethnic Germans, yes, it was agreed upon. It was agreed upon, but the outcome was that out of the 12 or more people who were forced out, almost 2 million people were massacred during the expulsion. It never happened in the Israeli-Arab conflict. And so on and so on. I mean, when you check In Yugoslavia, for example, there was not any agreement. And yet people were forced out. 3 million people, only in the 90s, speaking only about the 90s. So if you compare, Israel is the Israel-Palestine Arab conflict is the easiest case and not the opposite. So, but yet I do compare just in order to zoom out, in order to show the context of the so many events of population exchange. There is another question that I was asked by an Arab teacher in Israel. I gave it a lecture to a group of teachers, and she told me, look, my family, you cannot compare, she told me. You cannot compare because the people that you're speaking about, she challenged me. The people you're speaking about, when they left from India, they went to Pakistan. It was their own country. It was not their country. They were only Muslims. And the ethnic Germans, they left to the German state. So they felt at home, and so on and so on. But not my family, she told me. My family, they live like refugees wherever they are. Not in Israel, of course. So it's not the same. You cannot compare. So my answer was very simple. Look, in 48, there was not any kind of separate identity for Palestinians. They were part of the Arab world. When your family left, escaped, or forced out, they were forced out where to? Most of them live in the West Bank or Gaza. What is it? It was exactly the territory that was allocated to the Palestinian state. So actually, they went to a place, even if they went to Lebanon or to Syria or to Jordan, to a place with the same language, the same religion, the same identity, the same food. Everything was the same. It was the same. I mean, Zorbi family from a big family in Israel. They are all from the same tribe, from Iraq. So, I mean, they were totally connected. There was not any separation in that time. The war created this kind of borders, and much later was created the new identity of Palestinians. So you cannot complain. You can complain against the Arab world why they did not establish a Palestinian state between 49 and 67. You cannot complain against Israel. And anyway, they were absorbed in a place with the same culture, same religion, same language, same everything. But anyway, thanks so much for coming.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.